Hello and welcome to Rugby Chat, episode 1. Today we're going to be talking about the Lions, Super Rugby and Fiji as well. We have got 4 of the franchises covered off here in New Zealand because this is a show coming to you from the land of the long white cloud for rugby fans. And let's start at the bottom of the world in Invercargill. We have the man behind Cornflakes Crib. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it, talking about some rugby. I always have lots to say.
Well, that's good because we've got a full hour to fill. So let's see how you get on.
It's easy.
Moving away up, we're going to skip over Crusader country and head to Wellington, the capital. And our man by the Parliament is Will from Rugby Numbers. How are you doing?
Hey, good, Paul. Thanks for having me back on. Obviously, I said something interesting enough last time.
Well, last time I was at a beer festival, so I'm not sure I was that sober to remember much of it. Perhaps I should watch that one back. Well, let's wait and see. Cheers. I'm on the homebrew, by the way. I don't know how everyone else is doing. And finally, we get to Hamilton, where we have Mike from the rugby writer and radio host. How are you doing, sir?
Good, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's kick off. Say 5 questions over the next hour. The first one up is, so the Lions obviously won the second test, and I'm going to, I've gone blank as to what the score was. 24-21, was it? Oh, no.
I think so.
24-21, that's right. So
I'm trying to forget it. Stop reminding me.
Oh, dear me. So where was the second test won for the Lions? And as you've got so much to say, Steve, we'll kick off with you.
Where do you start? For me, 2 things probably stood out the most. Red card and defence. I think they're the 2 biggest things. Red card kicked it all off. The Lions tried to lose it as well as they could, but their defence come through. I think they played pretty well in that final 10 minutes, and I think any side that can keep the All Blacks trialless, obviously, is a pretty big deal. And credit to them that's how they got their defence and sorted that match.
And let's as we kicked off on the red card straight away. Any complaints from anyone around the red card, or are we comfortable with how that was officiated?
No, 100% a red card, I think. I've seen very little commentary throughout the week criticising the decision. I think possibly purists from back in the day would say it wasn't a red card, but under the new rules, there's just no arguing, no arms in the head. It's got to be a red card.
Yeah, so the whole shoulder barge is definitely off, is not allowed. And then as soon as it hit the head, yeah, he was a goner with that one. But as you say, the Lions or as Steve said, the Lions tried to lose it. To me, it was a good game up until that red card, and then it all just fell apart really as a game more than anything else. What happened there, do you think?
I think the Lions were sort of taken aback by Kino leaving the field, to be fair. When Sonny Bill got the red card, you'd expect to be going up against a back line with one down, and particularly in that midfield, it's a pretty big gap, isn't it? So taking Kino off the field was a stroke of genius from Hansen, and the Lions they were, like Justin Marshall said on the air, they were disgraceful, really, from there on out, and lucky to win. Great defence, though.
I got to say, just disgraceful in the sense of giving up too many cards, not disgraceful in the sense of actually of dirty play per se.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they sort of collectively had a bit of a shocker there, didn't they? Warren Gatland made a number of comments about keeping the penalty count down. He was frustrated with how much they'd been penalised in the first test. And gosh, they just went out and did the opposite, didn't they? I think there was a few comments about how they were unprepared to play against 14 men from such an early point in the game. I think there was one particular kick, can't remember who it was, one of the outside backs, which would have gone to the fullback if there'd been one there. And in the end, it just rolled dead. And so I think both teams were just thrown off their game completely. And I think the Lions managed to get it together in time to score a couple of tries at the end. I think another point is that the All Blacks got a taste of their own medicine. They're used to running teams off the park in the last 15 of the match, and they were just knackered from having to defend without an extra man. And I think they you could see a few hands on knees and a few people slow to get back up again. I don't think they're accustomed to being like that, even with the addition of their subs at the end of the match.
Yeah, two points just quickly as well. You know, those last two Lions tries were in that last 20, as you alluded, and typically that's when the All Blacks are most strongest. But also, Beauden Barrett, we've all talked about his goal kicking, but, you know, the chip kicks just didn't work. And there were a couple of occasions in that match, particularly in the last minute, where we tried a chip kick and, you know, it's worked up until now, and it kind of came back to bite him in the backside, really.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I don't want to come across as being too dismissive of the Lions' victory. I mean, it's the All Blacks' fault that they had 14 men for the match, and there's no way around that. You've just got to move on and deal with the consequences. There's been another comment here on Twitter from Sohair Osman, who says, with the red card, and when the Lions player managed to escape red for the exact same thing. What do you think about that?
Okay, the Lions supporter will step in here. It was. I've seen a lot of things, a lot of two pictures going. If this was red, why wasn't this? Sonny Bill Williams went into a tackle with a shoulder charge and caught somebody in the head. Whereas the other one was a clear out. Yes, he went through and off his feet, but we've seen Sam Cane doing that. We've seen players from both sides doing that on the clear outs. And really, what Vunipola went off for was more the repeat offence rather than the dangerous offence, which is why it was yellow rather than red. And yeah, as I say, I personally don't think it was. Yes, it was a silly thing to do, but I don't think it was any more dangerous than a lot of others. You've got Beauden Barrett was rolling around on the floor at the time, so he's moving, so you're not sure what you're going to hit as you go in. And as I say, in a ruck situation, you've got that happening all the time. So I don't think it was personally the same sort of thing.
I have an interesting comment on here from YouTube already, talking about, it's going back another week, but consistency of referees, which is my favourite subject, and how this test was different to the first test when apparently the comment says the All Blacks targeted Owen Farrell in a similar kind of way. So interested on everyone's thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Okay, there wasn't inconsistency. To me, I think it went both ways. So the other one was when we had Cody Taylor took out Owen Farrell with a clear shoulder charge. Now, Mako then took out Beauden Barrett, but it wasn't a clear shoulder charge. So he was making some vague attempt at blocking a ball, which he was never going to make, and then went through him rather than or the glancing blow, rather than Cody Taylor, who went in with a dropped shoulder, and yet Cody Taylor got away with it, and Mako got a penalty. So there was inconsistencies across the park, and yeah, I don't think it was just one way. And I think you're talking about Murray being targeted in the first test with his leg by Kano rather than Farrell. But yeah,
just jumping in there, focusing on a more positive aspect. Javid Ali's made a comment on Twitter in response to the question, where was the game won and lost? At 10 and 12. Brilliant game by those two. Came into their own in the second half. Is that something you'd agree with?
Came into their own in the last 20 minutes. Yeah, I think we saw there the reason that Lamape came on was that the Lions were looking at playing an expansive game. I know a lot of people thought, oh, look, it's two kickers on the pitch. It is, but it's also two guys who can pass. And let's be honest, Tio can't pass and Jonathan Davis can't pass. And if both your centres can't pass, the ball's never reaching your wingers. And I think that's what we saw there, was that the Lions forced the Lamape change by showing that they were looking to play an expansive game plan. And therefore the 7 against 8 forwards, as you say, got tired. And that's where the game was perhaps won at the end.
Yeah, you're surprised that Gatland didn't go to his bench a bit more in that last match?
I thought at the time I thought he was making a big mistake not going to his bench, and he could have really run the legs a bit more, because I think we only had 2 players off the bench. So yeah, no, I think he should have changed more. I've heard other podcasts talking about it, saying that it was the perfect he got justified wonderful selections, and I'm like, I think the Lions got out of jail here. Bowden Barrett's kicking, and they didn't use the bench. The other point that we should probably cover off on before we move on is, was there any, say Grossman again, was there any punishment for that swinging arm that knocked a New Zealand player out? There wasn't, but the sighting cleared him. What are your guys' views on that? Because I know what mine is.
Well, it's hard to say, right? Because one thing that we're seeing a lot in the modern game is that regardless of intent, if there's been, like taking a player out in the air, for example, if they land on their head, it's considered to be a worse offence than if they land on their shoulder, which is something that's caused a bit of controversy. And I think in this particular case, a player got knocked out. Whether it was intentional or not, you could make an argument that, I can't remember who the Lions player was at fault. And it possibly should have been Sean O'Brien. It's hard to see how that could be a red card. I would have thought that would have been an overreaction, but I think there's definitely grounds for. I don't think there was even a penalty awarded at the time, was there?
No, there wasn't. And to me, it was a guy joining a maul, binding his arm round the player and hitting a guy behind an unsighted player. So for me, because he's binding on, it's not to me, it wasn't a swinging arm to the head. It was a binding arm that then hit a head because of where the player was that was behind the player who was binding onto.
Sure, and I guess the comment I was badly trying to make is that what we're seeing is, even in the case of accidental injuries and accidental sort of clumsy challenges and things, we have seen players sent off for things like that in the past. They're taking any contact to the head extremely seriously, and I think that's perhaps where the argument comes from, that it could have been a yellow card.
No, I agree. It got ruled a rugby incident in the end, which, as you can tell from what I'm saying, I think was a correct decision. But you're right, with the tackle, it's I think the terminology they've used is, could you reasonably expect to have hit the head? Yeah, I think that's why we're seeing these things where, yeah, if you aim for the chest, there's a fair chance you're going to hit the head. So you're supposed to. It's about bringing that down, isn't it? Any last points before we move on to question 2?
There's just a comment on Twitter here, which is, echoes something I've heard a lot this week from Hamish, who says, the Lions, have the team to beat us fair and square, but I don't think last week's game would have been won against 15 men.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yep, I'd agree with that too. Easy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I said they got out of jail because of Barrett's kicking. Otherwise, they would have lost it even against 14. So moving on then, what changes to the size do you see happening for the Eden Park test? Which, just to get everyone just, I'm going to. But anyway, go on.
I think they've got to bring in Malachi Fekitoa to start. Now Mapi, yes, he's had a great season. I think he's the second top try scorer in Super Rugby or something. Did well in his All Black debut, especially given the situation. But Fekitoa, not everyone's cup of tea, but, to me, Hanson's been a pretty loyal selector, and it was a surprise to me anyway that Fekitoa wasn't there in the first place. So I reckon he needs to start. But apart from that, I wouldn't change the All Blacks, and I certainly, just on the Lions, would not change Sexton and Farrell, that combination. If they do that, there's going to be major problems.
So, sorry, Michael, are you suggesting that you'd have Fekitoa and Leonard Brown starting and Laumapi on the bench?
Yep, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, I thought Laumapi did what he was there to do, right? The guy's, clearly one of his parents is a fridge. He's absolutely a unit. And he made a couple of big block-busting sort of half breaks, dragging 4 or 5 defenders with him. I think that's basically all that was asked of him. He definitely had a bit of a weak game defensively, but he was part of a team that was a man down. So I think you can't be too concerned about having him on the bench for the third test. I think he's definitely going to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you. I think the same. I think I'd go with Fekitoa as before the squad was even announced. Fekitoa was in my All Black team and would have been, right up there in contention to starting in the first test if I was All Black selector. The only other contentious issue would be on the wings. Is the big talk again?
Well, no. Before we move on to the wings, I'm going to disagree with you guys.
Okay.
I think we're going to see Laumapi and Anton Leonard Brown. I think Hanson's very much, as you say, he's a consistent selector. Lamapi, you're the guy that's originally in the squad, therefore you're the next off the rank, and you get the starting spot. And then we have Fekitoa coming onto the bench. Is my on the assumption that Goodhue, is it, or Godwin? Goodhue, I think it is. Goodhue, who is also in the squad as an injury replacement, doesn't get called up. It does lead to a very inexperienced midfield. I agree. With probably about less than 10 caps between them, but yeah, it is. I think that's how it will go.
Yeah, although you wouldn't know it to watch Anton Leonard-Brown play. I think he's widely recognised as looking like he's been there for a while. The other comment to make about Fekitoa is he's quite a divisive player. People seem to either love him or hate him, and he sometimes gets criticised for his poor decision making, and he can be a bit of a white line fever non-passer on attack. It's frustrating for me, and I'm not even a Highlanders fan, But on the other side of that, he has been very strong defensively. I mean, it's easy to think of a couple of examples in the past where he's flown up out of the line, missed his tackle, and conceded a try. But that's probably true for most backline players. I think he is actually, obviously being selected for a reason.
Well, I've just heard that. Looking at online, NZ Rugby Quizzes reckons that Crotty is going to be fit.
Right. Really?
So then, going by your original comment, Paul, we'd expect to see probably Laumapi, Leonard-Brown starting, Crotty, Leonard-Brown starting, and Laumapi on the bench.
Absolutely. I think if Crotty is fit, if Crotty is fit, I think he comes straight back in.
Another point for me is the wings, though. Like someone mentioned, do they go with Rico Ioane again, or potentially bring in Julian Sevilla just because of the experience, if anything else, and Dag at fullback, so you'd have Julian Sevilla on one wing. What are we going to do with that back three?
I think you have to have Dag at fullback. He's a classy fullback, and he knows what he's doing. And you've got Julian Sevilla is another sort of hot and cold player. But when he's on form, he's on form. He's been there before, and Hansen has, I think, sort of used tactical dumpings in the past where players have been dropped from the side to give them a bit of incentive. TJ Perenara was a good example of that, and he came back in the best form he's ever been in. Dag, on the bigger picture, got left out of the World Cup and came back almost back to his old self again. So it's a possibility that he'll bring Sevilla back in to prove himself again.
Yeah, there's no one really else that you're going to play at fullback, is there, really? I mean, Dag's by far, at international level, tried and true tested player that is going to sort of best take the high balls, which are going to get kicked in his throat, as always. For me, the question is like just the wings, because you've got to have guys that can help Dag out at fullback. And that's when you go and look at the Sevillas and the players like that. And how much help are they really going to be to Dag under the high ball and that kicking game? This series just seems to rotate around as well.
Yeah, I mean, Dag took some flack during the week for dropping the ball and stuff. And I personally, whilst I'd love to be the one to disagree with you all and cause a bit more discussion, I have to agree. I think on Saturday night, no one was catching the ball in the air. If you jumped up to catch the ball, you dropped it on the whole. In the second half, there were a couple taken, but definitely initially, there was everyone was spilt, whoever it was. So I think you stick with Dag at the back. I don't think Naholo did anything wrong. Rico just went missing.
I also think, as a Hurricane supporter, I'm obligated to call for a Corey Jane recall.
Oh wow, that's well, there is a man who can handle the high ball, but he's not in the squad. There is no way he's getting called up. But I think he'll stay with Rico. He's a young kid, and he's learning. But I could see the argument for bringing Julian back in.
Oh dear, Corey Jane of all people. I thought you would have gone with Milner Scudder at least. Go with someone who's the future. Yeah,
he's looked a bit average coming back, but I'd put that down to lack of game time, I'd say. The guy's a special talent.
Milner Scudder's also had that whole season off through injury. So yeah, he's going to take some time. You'd think
He definitely looked really lively though in the matches I've seen him play, like against the Lions, and that he still has that spark.
Oh, the guy is, I think he's such a positive example of what rugby can be. You know, every time you see him interviewed, he's this really humble guy. He's just grateful to have been involved at all, let alone the fact that his international career is really just starting. And, you know, you never see him sort of moping or complaining or suggesting that something might have been someone else's fault. And it'll be great to see him back up to his full potential.
Just on the Lions, I wonder if Gatlin gives Noel the start. You know, Anthony Watson, okay, but I just feel that Noel had against the Chiefs in particular good enough for me to warrant that this guy can handle it in a starting environment against the All Blacks. I mean, his speed is just incredible. Mark.
So I'll pin my colours to the mast here. I'm an extra Chiefs fan, and so yes, I am a Jack Nowell fan through and through. His top end speed isn't quite there, but he is extremely nippy. He's very difficult to get the first hit on. He generally he generally breaks the first tackle, and yeah, off the mark he can be quick. So I guess a bit Milner-Scudder, like I said, Milner-Scudder's got more top end speed. But I think Anthony Watson has been absolutely solid. If I was going to bring him in, I'd probably bring him in for Daly rather than for Anthony Watson, who's not the natural winger. He plays his club rugby at centre, and so yeah, I would personally have put him in at for Daly. I can't see there being any other changes. I mean, there's some talk of Mako Vunipola being dropped, but the way that Gatlin's been playing his front rows, to me, it's always been he's been picking them as units, not as individual players.
Yeah, and I think many of the calls for Vunipola to be dropped have been because he's turned into a bit of a penalty magnet after having basically a meltdown in the previous tests. But the problem is you're going to replace him probably with Marla, who's equally a penalty magnet and offers less, I would say. So it's hard to see him dropping Vunipola given the options that he has to replace him.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they went with Noel. I mean, with Daly on the wing to start with, because I don't, you know, he's not a straight winger. But I think the reason Gatlin has gone with that he's safe. He does the basics well. Catches the ball, he makes his tackles, and he's kind of that consistent sort of player. Whereas, I don't know, from what I've seen of Noel over this whole series, he's pretty hot and cold in places, and he seems, I don't know if he's like that at club level, but he seems very confidence orientated. So if something goes wrong, you know, it's kind of like the old Carlos Spencer sort of days when it all goes downhill if he starts to lose a bit of the confidence in his ability. So I don't know, I haven't seen enough of him, but just suggestions from that, you know, when it's cold, it's ice cold with Noel, but Daly's just solid.
I think something that's Jack Nowell seems to, I don't know why, but his first game in New Jersey seems to go badly. It did for England against France. The very first ball, he was in line for the first kickoff and drops the ball straight away and had a bad game. Again, for the Lions, his first game was against Rieko Ioane at the Blues. He got isolated by the inside defenders not giving him the cover, and yeah, he got made to look bad. So yeah, I think he grows into a jersey rather than and then feels comfortable in the environment and doesn't feel comfortable initially. To give you an idea as to kind of the club, his background, why I'm saying that, at Exeter Chiefs, the guys he plays with are Luke Cowan-Dickey, who he went to play school with, Henry Slade, Sam Hill, Ewers, who else was, Jack Arnott was there as well. All of them came through the academy together. Now Jack Arnott's moved away, Joe Collins moved away, but they all came through the academy together. They all played England under 21s, under 20s together. His background is in a very comfortable environment that he knows with his mates. So when he gets into these new environments, I think he takes a while to settle. That's my take. So any last points on that? Sorry, chance for Vunipola on the bench with McGrath starting. Yeah, that's what people are talking about rather than. Sorry, that's from Derek O'Donnell. That's what people are talking about rather than. I don't think Joe Marler's getting anywhere near the squad. It's a question of those who swap. I say I don't think so because of the units.
Well, there's an interesting stat on here by rugbyreferee.net that says that Roman Plot, however you say his name properly, has penalised Marler more times than anyone else in the Lions tour across all levels of rugby. So take that if you want to believe it.
Wow.
Super stat.
See rugby numbers. Will, this is why we've got you on. Your rugby numbers. You're supposed to be the stat and algorithm man. So, anyway, let's move on to question 3. What was your moment of last weekend's Super Rugby games, where all the South African teams are playing again?
Oh, go the mighty Kings.
Yeah, it has to be the Kings.
To be honest, I didn't watch, but yeah, Kings, good to see them get a win. I hate the Kings, but I hate all South Africa rugby, so.
Oh,
whatever.
Just losing viewers and listeners at the drop of a hat.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, guys.
Don't worry, we're aiming for a New Zealand audience. So it's okay if
we can bag the South African teams.
Okay.
I was pretty. I've been keeping an eyeball on the Kings this season because they've really exceeded expectations. I mean, to be fair, expectations were very low, but they've exceeded them a lot. I made a comment earlier on my site about how their upset over the Waratahs has basically defined the season for both of those teams, and I had the Kings. I gave them basically a 1-in-4 chance to beat the Jags last week, which I think was higher than others had given it. And it's almost getting to the point now where it's not considered an upset, I'd say. They're starting to beat some decent teams, or at least come close. And it's been a vastly improved offense that I've seen. They still leak a lot of points, but they're actually able to score some, which historically has been their problem. And they are also, I would say, the most improved team so far this season. You've seen some improvements in some other teams like the Blues, for example, who have definitely come a long way. And the Force have made a bit of an improvement. But I think the Kings have really stepped up, and it's actually quite a shame to think that they might be gone next season, given the effort they've been making this season. There's definitely precedent for poor teams turning themselves around. The Lions were dreadful for a very long period of time. They just lost so many matches, and then they just turned it around, and to the point where they were runners up. So you can't just write them off early on into their Super Rugby careers, I suppose.
Yeah, and that year they were out of Super Rugby was the defining moment for them. I had an interview with the head of performance from the Lions, and he said that's where they built. They had a choice there. Either they collapsed and went bust and they never existed again, or they came back and stronger, and they decided obviously clearly to the second. They got the right structures in place, and hey, that's where they are now. It's going to be interesting to see next season how they go without their head coach, because he's obviously been a big part of that. And obviously at the weekend they beat the Suns 94-7, which is makes a bit of a mockery of the tournament, to be honest.
So we still don't know the teams from SA that are going to be dropped out from Super Rugby. Is that right? Or did I miss the announcement?
No, I think there's been a lot of talk about the Cheetahs and the Kings being the two that are likely to go. There's been some comments about them moving to the Pro 12. Although I don't understand the full details, but talking to a South African friend of mine, the involvement of the Kings in Super Rugby is fairly politically complicated, shall we say. And it is viewed by some to be a bit of it has a bit of a safety net through the politics that go on over there. And there were some comments that the Bulls could potentially see themselves at risk. I think that's unlikely. They're the only South African team to have actually won the competition, for example, not recently. But I think it's pretty much a given it's going to be the Cheetahs and the Kings.
Well, okay, so I'll throw a rumor out there that's different, and this wasn't really the topic we're supposed to be talking about, but anyway, I've heard a rumor that if they can get an agreement with the Pro 12, that basically all of South African rugby moves over to the Pro 12 after the next TV media rights, which will be after 2019, then we'll actually see the Sharks and the Bulls leading the way and moving this year. So
okay, wow, I hadn't heard that one, so that's pretty interesting.
So it's not one from mainstream media, so it could really be absolutely dodgy, and it probably is. But it's
well, let's perpetuate it then and put it out there.
But that's the other option, is that it's not the Kings and the cheaters, and actually because a lot of the requirements from the Pro 12 have been that there are Springboks in the sides that play in the Pro 12. What they don't want to do is take on 2 more Italian teams.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you're the South African Rugby Union and you're sending a couple of teams to a new market, effectively, you're not going to send your 2 worst ones, right? You're going to want to give new fans a reason to support the teams.
Yep, exactly, and also you're obviously going to be trying to sell new TV rights in South Africa about it, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to go with those 2.
It's probably worth mentioning that the Bulls upset the Sharks as well. I think that would have. I think that's the second time they've beaten them this season. If I'm correct. I might have to go back and check that one. But that was definitely. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say whether the Sharks were dreadful, the Bulls were better than expected, or a combination of both.
I mean, I've only seen highlights of all the games, but the Bulls definitely look better than they have done in the past. Their inside centre, and I've just gone totally blank as to who it is. Serpentine, isn't it? I think it is. Yeah, it was has stepped up. Someone I think that, if I'm right, isn't he the guy that was part of their 2012 under 20s Junior Rugby Championships winning side, I think, he so he's looked very good. I think he was playing in the playing for the Springboks as well. So they have definitely stepped up from the break. Before we move on to the next question, one stat I saw was Ryan Crumbrink making 112. Actually, I've actually got it open here because I thought this was a very cool stat. Except it's just refreshing now. Was 1,200 plus meters running with ball in hand, which is more than most teams will do in a game. I think the team that's run a kilometre with ball in hand generally has had a very, very good game. So I thought that was kind of nuts. And it was also something like 9 runs as well. So it was something crazy that I can't be that low connect, because otherwise that's the length of the pitch. It was off a very low number of runs as well.
But there's no real advantage here for the Bulls, though. This season's over. Like, sure, they've beaten the Sharks and all that stuff, but this season's done. So they've got no real gain except for just to be spoilers. The Sharks are already confirmed to be the wild card spot in South Africa as well. So there was very little riding on this round of Super Rugby for any of the sides.
Actually, for the only thing that I think is left up for grabs is seedings. We know who the 8 teams are that are going to be in the quarterfinals, and it just comes down to seedings from the last couple of rounds of games, really.
Yeah, so the Lions will be particularly pleased with their result, because if it comes down to sort of points differential and so on, they've done themselves a big favour.
They have, and you'll be able to go and watch the Crusaders for their last game when they visit the Hurricanes in Wellington, which is so that's they haven't got an easy game to finish either. So let's move on next then. So Argentina lost both their games comfortably to England. I mean, they beat Georgia, but Georgia have never beaten a Tier 1 side, so that should not have been a big surprise. The Jaguares won something. It was 4 out of their first 5 games, with 3 of them at home. But since then, really have only won like 1 game, and have lost to the Force and have lost to the Kings now as well. So, have Argentina got the model wrong of trying of only picking home-based players when they've only got 1 team?
No, not at all. I think that Argentina are going to front for that rugby championship. You know, they've shown them, not this year, okay, but you know, in previous big matches, they've shown that they can beat top teams, and I reckon within the next couple of years, they're gonna either come seriously close to, or they're probably going to beat the All Blacks. But yeah, I don't read too much into that.
No, I'm on the same boat with that. I really rate the Argentinian side. I think they have a lot of quality players. I don't think they've gone with a bad model by having homegrown players. I just think that they have a lot for those homegrown players to do, and they're expanding their player base quite exponentially over the last few years as well, getting a lot of new players coming through. I think it's only still up for Argentina. They got some superstars in there. I think they just need to keep on doing what they're doing and just keep progressing. We've already seen them in Super Rugby. They have improved, at least, and it's better, than going backwards. So it's a forward step, and just keep on going for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. When I watch the How Irish play, I'm reminded of what the Hurricanes used to be like, which is sort of a lot of flair, but without the finesse to actually finish off the things that they're trying. You see a lot of offloads and line breaks and things, and that all just sort of break down when they get close to the line. And so I think it's just a matter of time before they start to get it together, and they'll be a really powerful side, and that's obviously going to have a flow-on effect to the national team as well, right? Because their performance seems to have gone pretty much hand in hand this year.
No, it has, and I guess that, to me that's the issue. We're asking too few players to do too much. I don't think there's any country that's managed to run a decent national team off only one home team. And if you look at Scotland, they've lacked. They've got two professional teams in Scotland, and they found that's not a big enough player base for their international team. They have to pick up from abroad. So I'm going to go against the grain here with you guys. I think that you need more than one team, one club team to create competition for a national team.
I definitely agree that they need more than one team. Oh, sorry. But they just have so many players. If they had more than one team, is good. I'm not saying they don't. But I just think that they need to keep homegrown players is definitely what they do. I don't think going abroad is going to help them any way whatsoever. And the final point on them from me is what Hamish has said in the comments on YouTube there is about the travel, which is a huge factor. Where they're going all over the place, all over the globe to play their games. So, fatigue, travel, and just trying to grow your player base on such a one team is really the big thing for them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's one downside to what they're doing, which is worth pointing out, which is that they're going to end up putting their players in the position of making a choice. Do you want to play for the national team, or do you want to earn big money in France? And you're starting to see a trend where players are picking the big money, which is an entirely valid and sensible thing to do. But I think they run the risk at losing some of their talent. Some of the offers that these French clubs are making and other European clubs be pretty hard to say no to.
Oh, I can't stand French rugby. You know what? They're the pimple on the buttocks of world rugby. I'm sorry, but just on that, I'd be quite happy to get rid of the Sun Wolves and have two Argentinian teams. There you go. Discuss.
Well, I was just going to pull a comment off her Twitter, which was Sanzor need one Aussie team or one South African team being axed to be relocated to Argentina. So, which I guess is similar to what you're saying here, is that the Sunwolves should go and allow a second Argentinian team instead. I guess the thing there is money, isn't it? Let's be honest. The reason there is a team in Japan is because Japan is the second or third largest economy in the world, and if you crack that, there's cash. There's enough cash for everybody. And you can start competing with France. If you don't, if you turn your back on that and try and fund a competition out of Argentina, you're not going to be paying very much money for players at the end of the day.
That's the same reason why we've got South Africa as well, with 6 teams.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you got South Africa, because again, South Africa's is a net contributor to Sanzar cash-wise. And therefore, you have to a certain degree, keep them happy. And so, personally, I think that until they get a second team, they need to say something like 3/4 of the squad will be from the Jaguares, and we're allowed 6 or 7, as I mean, to the wider player squad, players from Europe, wild card selections, which is what Wales have gone down the route of, where Gatland has, I think it's 3 wildcard selections into his squad. So I think they need to go down that route and have some sort of wildcards in the same way that Wales do. Not that it's helped Wales that much.
Do you think even with those wildcards, he's probably a bit reluctant to choose players that aren't Welsh?
Well, no, he's still picking players who are Welsh. He's just not picking players who are Welsh playing in Wales. So, for example, Halfpenny plays in Toulon. George North plays for Northampton Saints in England. So those are the players that he's picking.
Yeah, no, sorry, just a dumb joke there.
Yeah.
Hey, there's an interesting comment from Hugh Rothwell on Twitter, just going back to the impact of having one Argentine team for Super Rugby. He says, makes you wonder what impact a Pacific Island Super Rugby team would have on the national sides.
No, please, no. You're
not in favour of a Pacific Island Super Rugby team?
No. And there's no real intelligence behind that. Just, it's just my opinion.
Well, they talk about segues and stuff on radio, so let's just move on to that. Bill Bowman has backed the idea of a Pacific Island team into a major competition. That's how he put it. We obviously had Ben Ryan fronting up, saying, "I have a group of people willing to fund a Super Rugby team in Fiji." So where will they fit in? As I say, Bill Bowman said major competition rather than Super Rugby directly.
Well, what are they trying to achieve? They bring teams in, they cut teams out, they talk about bringing more teams in again. From a fan's point of view, it is hard to understand what they're trying to accomplish. It looks like what they're trying to accomplish is an American-style conference system where you have large numbers of teams from different geographical areas sort of playing their own sort of sub-series and then playing the winners of each of those against each other. It looks like that's what they're trying to achieve. But if you look at the map of the world, trying to do that in the southern hemisphere around the Pacific Ocean just seems like madness, really. And I think this year has shown you kind of need to go really big or not at all. There doesn't seem to be a comfortable middle ground. I think most people would agree that the last couple of seasons of Super Rugby have been difficult to follow, difficult on the players, and have in some ways it is hard to claim that these teams that are winning or even making the playoffs are the best ones to be there because they've benefited from the conference system. So I think there's definitely arguments to be made in favour of further expansion, but it just seems a little directionless at the moment.
Exactly, and a perfect example of that right now is the Lions. They could. I think they're going to make the finals, but they haven't even played a Kiwi side. And to bring in, as bad as it sounds, to bring in a Pacific team to this competition is just going to have the same effect as the Sunwolves, and even to a certain standpoint, the Hug Warriors. It's just, are they there to really compete and test opposition? They're not. They're there to make up the numbers, bring in more money, and it's just, yeah.
Well, there's another argument to be made, which is that, strictly speaking, the Super Rugby teams aren't geographically based as such. They're franchises. And so you could argue that these Pacific Island players have plenty of opportunities to play Super Rugby. They can do it in any of the existing teams. And that's, in fact, what we're seeing. I think the problem with that is the effect it has on their national sides, right? That's really the only downside. No one's saying that these players from Fiji, Tonga, Samoa don't have opportunities to play professional rugby. I guess they have to be prepared to move to New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, or any of the other countries. France, yes. And so it's not like they're missing out in that sense, but what they are missing out on is the potential benefits that a professional club team would have on their national side or sides. I
guess there are two sides to this. One of the things that I'm assuming you guys will know as living in New Zealand is the how important family is to the in Pacifica culture.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying before about Sansa, though, comments on that.
Have struggled a lot, and we've seen people commit suicide and players be taken advantage of as well. So this is an opportunity for these guys to play rugby, earn a living without having to leave home, and that's part of it. There's also, you say, benefiting the national side, but also there's this as we've seen with the upcoming increase from 3 to 5 years of residency, there is a public perception that there are too many players getting into other sides because of residency, and so maybe. And so the other thing is, giving people opportunity to earn a living and still play for their island sides, rather than having to play for England, where you get £20,000 a game. Is kind of those are the solutions. Those are the problems they're trying to solve with this, more than trying to solve Super Rugby's problems and provide competition.
Yeah, perhaps just I may have been a little critical of SANZAAR. I said they seem directionless. I think that's perhaps possibly from bad communication rather than an actual lack of direction. But from a fan's point of view, it is very difficult to understand some of the decisions they're making. There's a comment here on Twitter who just, Hugh Rothwell suggests that Pacific Island teams' inclusion in Super Rugby would have to be part of a major restructure rather than a straight expansion.
I agree, and I think one of the topics we will talk about in a future episode of this will be what is the structure of Super Rugby going to look like after the next Rugby World Cup, when the next round of media rights come in, because I think that is when the next big shake-up is going to come. I can't see there being much change between now and then, but I think that's something that we could easily spend a good 20 minutes, half an hour talking about. So, yeah, I totally agree. I think there is a major restructuring of global rugby about to happen, not just Super Rugby.
But you say that about SANZAAR, and I question whether SANZAAR really have any plan about what the hell they're doing, because they seem to not even know what they're doing next year, let alone in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And the problem I find with Pacific Island teams, not that they're bad players or they won't support their team or anything like that, but it's all money. It's all business orientated. It's all, can they support this side? How much is SANZAAR going to have to help them? How much is World Rugby going to have to help them? Who's going to help them? Where's the money come from to pay for everything? That's the biggest issue. Nothing to do with the players. There's no question that the talent is there. No question at all. But it's just money. It's business, and that's their biggest issue.
And I think sadly that's the way it has to be. If there's no money, then the teams are going to fail. I think that's a fairly broad statement, but I think that's true. I think they have to treat it like that. Otherwise, they're just setting themselves up for failure.
Any comments on here? We need the dollars from the Sunwolves, though, which is why someone's suggesting about they'd rather see a Pacific Island team than a Sunwolves team. And yeah, that's very true. I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier, was that it's about trying to get into the Japanese market there as well.
Well, they're definitely giving it their best shot. I don't know if you've seen some of the merchandise that's available for the Sunwolves supporters, but it puts every other team to shame.
And for a team that's only won one game, they get crowds like nobody else in Japan. If we think that Argentina, the Jaguars have got a poor deal, the deal that the Sunwolves have is even worse, where they have to play half their home games away in Singapore, in front of 2 men and a dog. Having lived in Singapore, people do not turn up to these events. We used to have a Sevens World Series event there, and you could just walk up and walk in and buy a ticket on the day and basically have your choice of any seat in the ground, because there would be less than a tenth of the ground full in the old days. And so they lost it for a while, and they've got one back again. And again, having seen pictures, there wasn't a great crowd. There was a good crowd, but that was the first year back. My guess is that novelty factor will die off, and there'll be even less again this year turning up for that event. So the Australian Basketball Association tried to put a team up there and failed. No one turned up and watched it. Singaporeans don't go watch sport on the whole, and I think that's a bad choice of them. I think they should be allowed to build their home crowds and also not have to travel quite so much as well.
That'll be the next thing, an All Blacks game taking place in Singapore.
Well, I suppose New Zealand rugby want to have more international games. And why? Because it means they get more money to be able to try and pay their players enough so they don't all leave to go to France and England at the end of the day. We can complain about there being too much rugby and player welfare and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the reason the All Blacks are playing games in Chicago is because it's to try and fund New Zealand Rugby to be able to afford to keep their players. Really. So let's move on to next week then. And so let's get your predictions. First up, we have clearly let's leave that one to the end and let's run through. We have a round of Super Rugby games coming up between the South African and Australian sides. So first up is Reds versus Brumbies. How do we see that one going, boys?
Brumbies all the way easy, I think, on that one. I think the Brumbies have shown that you can build a game plan around a team that's developing quite a lot, because they lost a boatload of players. I've said it a number of times this season. Everyone expected the Brumbies. I seen them, people predicting them to finish dead last in the Australian Conference, which, you know, is a bit insulting with the way the Rebels have been. But they've really shown up. They've put together a good blank game plan with, you know, players no one really knows, and they seem to play their strengths, and they avoid what they're weak at. And teams, they haven't seemed to develop the way to steer them away from that too much, maybe apart from the New Zealand sides. But generally in Australia, at least they perform pretty strongly there.
I think that's true. I agree with that. And I think they've also benefited enormously from the Waratahs' performance this season, who've just sort of removed themselves as their primary competition for the conference top spot. But that's not to take away from the Brumbies have obviously been performing. You don't win a conference if you don't perform. The Reds have been an interesting one this season. There was a lot of hype pre-season. Great looking roster. You know, here this is going to be their sort of season to make a comeback, and they just haven't really. They sort of have sat somewhere in the middle. They haven't been awful, but they haven't been fantastic either. I think they've run a couple of good teams quite close, and I can see them definitely keeping up with the Brumbies for some of the match, but I can't see them winning.
Yeah, I'll take the Brumbies as well. Bonus point win.
Oh, bonus point win! Wow, that's a big call. Yeah, the Reds are going to be the strongest team on paper in Australia, but they are one. But they just can't put it onto the grass. There is some good work by Ben Darwin talking about combinations, and basically they just, as you say, they brought in a lot of new players and they just don't have the combinations. Will be interesting to see if Genier goes back there, because he's supposed to return to Australian Rugby next year. So, yeah, I agree. Brumbies to win that one. Force versus Rebels.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think the Force will win that one. The Force don't seem to be a team that can dominantly, you know, control a game and win it away. And the Rebels, I'm still going back to it. They played 40 minutes of amazing rugby not long before the international break. The Rebels have got enough talent, I think, to still challenge a team like the Force, who themselves aren't amazing. Improved, yes, but Australia's pretty weak at the moment. Their rugby is pretty weak. It could be close. I'll pick the Force by a whisker, just because I think overall better squad and have had a better season. And the Rebels can capitulate pretty quickly and pretty easily. So I'll go the Force, but I think the Rebels should give them a good run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally a fight for survival, you would think. These are the two teams that are allegedly on the chopping block, although who knows what's happening with that. I think it's been a lot more than the original 3 days that the ARU said they would make their decision in, and it's turned a bit nasty. There have been some pretty inflammatory press releases on either side coming out, and I'm just glad that I'm not a part of that. But I mean, you've seen a lift in performance, especially I think from the Force, but somewhat from the Rebels as well, in response to the threat of exclusion that they're facing. And it's going to be fantastic. I suspect it'll be a fairly heated game with a few bits of niggle on and off the ball, I expect. Still saying the Force I think they'll easily beat the Rebels.
Yeah, Force will win. It's in Perth, isn't it?
It's in Perth, yep.
Yep. Force will win, but it'll be close.
Well, I'm back in the Force to be quite comfortable winners. I think they will. They have improved since being under threat, whereas the Rebels, to me, had a dead cat bounce. They had a couple of games where they improved and then they just reverted to mediocrity, which is really real shame. As I did an article about them 2 years ago saying that that they had a breakthrough season, and then they just went and regressed after that. It shows you what I know. Next up, Waratahs hosting the Jaguares.
Oh God, the Waratahs. I can't support the Waratahs. Go the Jaguares. Big win. on the road, which the Jaguares don't like, but I'm just going with my heart on this one over my head. The Waratahs just seem like headless chickens running around the field. They just seem to have no idea what they're doing, no plan, no real initiative of anything. They're frustrating to watch, and I don't like the Waratahs, and I still find it frustrating, and they can't catch a ball, and they just seem at complete sea with what they're doing. I'm picking the Jaguares to come out and have a stormer on the road. That's my one, and hopefully they do it as well. Also, on that last match, interesting point is that if the Western Force do win and the Waratahs lose, which hopefully, they'll be second. Just keep that in your hats in Australia.
Yeah, that's definitely, gosh, the Waratahs season was just slipping away from them, isn't it? I mean, they were the champions not that long ago. I think they're at home going to keep it together. I think the Jaguars, the Jaguares, are just probably one of the most unpredictable teams. They should win a lot of the time, and they just don't. So I'd give the Waratahs probably about a 2-1 chance.
Waratahs, one of the worst teams in the comp, but I'm predicting that they will win, and there'll be another example that these Jaguares and lower tier new teams to Super Rugby are just not cutting the mustard. Waratahs easy.
Yeah, I think also the Waratahs will win it. I just think the Jaguares will try too many offloads and make too many mistakes, and the Waratahs will come through. Heading over to South Africa, so with the Resurgent Bulls against the Resurgent Kings.
I can't stray away from my Kings, I'm afraid. I just enjoy watching the Kings too much. They're explosive and expansive, exciting, and it's just good to see a team looking like they're actually wanting to play. They're actually wanting to get out there. They've got nothing to lose. It's all on the line. On the other side of things, of course, the Bulls, improved much better, but we've been far from seeing a very good Bulls team this year. They've been fairly average throughout the whole thing, and can I see them stringing 2 good performances together? Seems unlikely. Kings give them a run by 2 points.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Kings are another team that has got a point to prove, right? But I mean, obviously, they're no chance of making the playoffs, but they want to demonstrate that they deserve to be in Super Rugby. It may be completely out of their hands. Well, I suppose it is, but I still can't see them beating the Bulls away from home. I'm going to go for the Bulls, but a close match.
Probably got about as much interest in this as watching a Pacific side in Super Rugby. Seriously, I'll go the Bulls.
So I'm going Bulls as well, but but I'm doing that off the back of the fact that the Kings have had to travel all the way to Argentina and back again, and so I think that travel is going to be the telling factor, and that the Kings will win this one. The Bulls will win this one because of the Kings' travel more than anything else. So the last Super Rugby game of the weekend, which I'm sure Mike will not care about either, Stormers versus the Sunwolves.
This should be a pretty easy one, really, for the Stormers. At home, they got a good season behind them. The Stormers, they've had a decent year. They've wrapped up their conference. They're so far ahead in Africa one that it doesn't even matter what they do from here on in. The Sunwolves, they were dreadful last week. Any team that loses that badly, it's hard to pick them. And really, they're only a good pick when they're at home. If they're on the road, it's even harder to give them more than 1% chance of winning this one. Segway, beautiful.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. They're just such a frustrating team. I was pumped when they joined. I was probably one of the few people who was excited to see them come into the competition, and they scored some glorious tries in their first few matches when they had Tusi Pisi at 10, and they had some wonderful crossfield kicks and some good steps, and it was looking really promising, and then it just plunged down into cellar dwellers. I'd give the Stormers, high 90% chance of winning this one.
Sunwolves beat the Stormers in New Orleans. Nah, just kidding. Just kidding. Stormers will win that one easy. Can you imagine it though? Just imagine it.
It would be fantastic, and I know that Steve loves my predictions as they tend to be undercooked, but even I'm going for the Stormers by 40 in this game.
Whoa!
which I never go more than 20. I very rarely go more than 15. But yes, I think if the Cheetahs beat the Sunwolves by 40 points and the Stormers beat the Cheetahs last weekend, they should be beating them by 40 points plus. That's my rationale there. So that's it, folks. We have come to the end. Thank you very much, everyone who has watched. Thank you, everyone who's tweeted, everyone who has given us has chatted on YouTube, and also who's now listening on the podcast, because I will be putting this out as a podcast as well. If you are, don't forget, please subscribe to the podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get all thumbs up, likes, shares, all of that kind of stuff. It really does help. So thank you very much to my guests. Steve, where can people get hold of you?
Before I say where you can get hold of me, haven't you forgot one important match that you wanted to do a prediction of?
Of course, yes. Because that was at the top of my list, and I've gone and forgotten. And of course, I decided on the fly, I reversed order and messed up, didn't I? So it is obviously the third test of the Lions tour. All Blacks versus Lions. What's your predictions, guys?
Well, fairly easy for me. If it stays 15-15, the All Blacks should win this one quite comfortably. Just on the effort of the last two games. You know, even with 14 men, the Lions easily could have lost that game. First match was pretty much a good dominant win. So for me, All Blacks easily 18 points.
Yeah, I have to agree. I can't see the All Blacks dropping this one. It's been a long time, I think, since they've lost 2 in a row, and they'll be very keen to make up for last week.
I'm going to do this in 2 parts. Prediction, but also a want. So my prediction is that the All Blacks will win by 20 points. But I want to see the Lions win, because the game, World Rugby needs the Lions to win. The All Blacks have had it their own way for so long, and yes, I'm a Kiwi, yes, I'm an All Black fan, but you know what? The Eden Park Hoodoo, it needs to end, and I want it to end this Saturday. Go Lions.
Wow, this is a fantastic turn up for the books. Loving it. I, being a Lions fan, I obviously want the Lions to win, but I just can't see it happening. I think I'm backing the All Blacks, or I'm predicting the All Blacks to win, probably by about 7 is the margin I'm going to go for. Not 18. That's crazy talk.
Hey, you said that 2 weeks ago.
Well, yes, true. So. There we go. So 3-1 on. Oh well, no, 4 predictions for the All Blacks, but 2 who want the Lions to win, which is a nice, good balance. So yes, now I can wrap up the show. And yes, like, share, subscribe, all of that cool stuff. Steve, where can people get hold of you?
You can find me, Cornflakes Crib. You can get me there on Twitter, at Cornflakes Crib, of course, on YouTube, the same thing, Cornflakes Crib. You can find heaps of stuff like this, previewing rugby, matches, gameplays of different things, all sorts of rugby, gaming related, everything you could want, so you don't need to go anywhere else.
Oh, what? Anyway, it's dearie me. Yes. So, but the point is that it's gaming related. So if you're into your rugby computer games, Steve's a great place to be. Will, where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so I like rugby, I like numbers, and my site is simply rugbynumbers.com. Very easy to remember. You can find me on Twitter at rugbynumbers. At the moment, I cover Super Rugby. I do predictions for each match. I've got a statistical method for ranking the teams. I chuck out the odd bit of analysis on who's having a good season, who's having a bad season, various bits and pieces. And stick around, because during the off season, I'm going to be expanding to cover international rugby as well. So that'll be something to look forward to.
Now, the key difference between his predictions and mine are he uses an algorithm, so it's scientifically based, whereas I just go, who do I feel like today? I think it's them. So that's the difference between our predictions. And we did a competition last year, and I lost out to Rugby Numbers by 1 round. So it was very close. Mike, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at RealMikePullman. Also go to lastwordonrugby.com. I'm a so-called editor. No, I write a lot of content for those guys, so go to lastwordonrugby.com. And yeah, YouTube, Real Michael Pullman. Just started my foray into post-game reactions, not analysis, because I can't analyze anything. But yeah, so you can find me everywhere.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm one little comment. Steve, great change to your backdrop there. I see you got the flags up, hiding all the mess. That's fantastic.
Does anyone know who they are? That's the question I have for the audience.
I remember when they almost beat the Miami Heat, or they looked like they were going to beat the Heat a few finals ago. You know, that series when LeBron James had a meltdown and he ran all the way down the court. Remember that? Yeah,
the Pacers are they're also nearly halves of NBA.
That's who they are. Cool.
Someone's got to support them.
And so, obviously, I am Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. So at DrivingMaul on Twitter and this YouTube channel as well. So please do subscribe to this YouTube channel, which is YouTube/C/DrivingMaul. And obviously, I am the host of Rugby Chat, the new podcast. So please do subscribe. Thank you, everybody. And we will be missing next week, but we'll be back on the 18th of July. So 8 p.m. New Zealand time, 18th of July, back on YouTube. And there will be another Rugby Chat. And I will have a few of these guys along for the ride.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.